Washington's point man on North Korea, Biegun, has held back-to-back meetings with the various senior South Korean officials over the last couple of days. But what are these meetings for, and can they lead to a breakthrough in negotiations between the US and North Korea as well? We'll look at that further later in today's show. But first, we get the latest headlines by turning to Devin Whiting at the News Center. Devin.
Hi, Jung-ho. The South Korean government is building a huge renewable energy cluster in the southwestern city of Kunsan, Jeollabuk-do Province. President Moon visited the area today as part of his tour of the country's provinces. Cha Sang-mi has the report.
President Moon Jae-in visited Jeollabuk-do Province on Tuesday on the first stop of his tour to boost the economies of the nation's provinces. To highlight the importance of South Korea's drive toward renewable energy, President Moon attended a ceremony on Tuesday in Saemangeum, a coastal area in the city of Kunsan, Jeollabuk-do Province, to unveil his vision for a massive renewable energy cluster by 2022. The Saemangeum cluster will contain 3 solar parks and a wind farm, producing a total of 4 gigawatts of power, or the equivalent of 4 nuclear reactors. Citing the nation's lagging figures for renewables, which make up just 8% of the country's power generation, the president reiterated his campaign pledge of fostering Korea's environmentally friendly energy so that 20% of the country's energy comes from renewables by 2030. The so-called Renewable Energy 30-20 plan is not just environmentally friendly, but will also help create new industries and boost employment. Over the next 10 years, the Saemangeum cluster alone is forecast to attract 100 renewable energy-related companies and create 100,000 jobs. Praising the people of Jeollabuk-do Province and the efforts of the Saemangeum Development and Investment Agency, President Moon vowed to invite manufacturing firms and set up research centers within the cluster to raise Korea's renewable energy skills to another level. President Moon said this project will be a good opportunity for local energy firms that are struggling from lack of domestic demand. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
After 5 straight sessions of decline, South Korea's main stock index has recovered back above the 2,000 mark. The benchmark Kospi closed at 2,014, up 0.9% from yesterday's close. Shares were purchased by institutions, which offset the sell-off by foreign investors and local individuals. The government's plans to boost confidence in the market also help improve sentiment. The Financial Services Commission held an emergency meeting this morning in which the chairman of the FSC, Choi Jong-gu, said the agency will review a contingency plan and use it to help stabilize the stock market if necessary. This announcement also comes a day after the FSC said it'll inject a fund worth around $428 million into undervalued local stocks. The Bank of Korea also held an emergency meeting vowing to work closely with the FSC and the Finance Ministry. It's not just stocks that have been slipping. Sentiment among businesses in South Korea this month has fallen to the lowest point in almost 2 years. And apparently to blame is the price of oil. For November, the outlook is even worse. Go Ryun-hee has the details.
Business sentiment among Korean firms dropped this month to its lowest level since December 2016, mainly due to manufacturers' concerns about the spike in international oil prices. According to the Bank of Korea, the business survey index came to just 73 in October, down 2 points from the month before. A reading below 100 means there are more pessimists than optimists. The central bank attributed the fall to especially low sentiment among the nation's manufacturers. Their index marked 71 in October, down 2 points on month and the lowest in 2 years. The biggest drop was in the chemical industry because a rise in international oil prices made raw materials more expensive. For instance, to buy crude, South Korea's benchmark hit its highest price in almost 4 years in the first week of October, to trade at more than $80 a barrel. Sentiment for next month is looking grim as well. A forecast from the Korea Economic Research Institute puts the business survey index for November at 90.4. which is around 7 points lower than this month. The institute says this would not only be the second lowest figure this year, but also the largest on-month drop since June 2016. Companies said the overall decline of Korea's manufacturing industries resulted in fewer opportunities for investment and employment. The institute added that the rising trade tensions between the U.S. and China are driving sentiment down, because many Korean companies rely heavily on exports to these two economies. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon, meanwhile, says the nation's economy is in limbo because of uncertainties at home and abroad. At a business dinner Monday with top financial and economic leaders of the Korea Employers Federation, the PM promised that for the rest of the year, the government will do everything it can to deregulate, to foster new industries and jobs, and to improve the working environment. The Prime Minister also said the ongoing U.S.-China trade war is a serious hurdle for countries like South Korea that rely heavily on exports. In other news, the U.S. Special Representative for North Korea, Stephen Biegun, met this afternoon with South Korea's Unification Minister Cho Myoung-gyon. It's expected that the two discussed the international sanctions on North Korea because the two Koreas will need some exemptions from them so their joint projects like railroad connections and forestry work can go ahead. Washington's nuclear envoy will also meet Seoul's National Security Advisor Chung Eui-yong. On Monday, he met Foreign Minister Kang Yonghwa and Seoul's own nuclear envoy Lee Do-hun. Those talks are likely to have covered the dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington and an analysis of North Korea's latest moves. Foreign Minister Kang Yonghwa also spoke over the phone Monday with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, briefing him on her meeting with Stephen Biegun. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, Kang and Pompeo exchanged views on denuclearization and ways to bring permanent peace to the peninsula. They also discussed other pending issues for the allies, including the U.S. sanctions that are about to be imposed on Iran. Seoul's Foreign Ministry says Kang asked for Seoul to be exempt from those sanctions, a request Pompeo said he would take into account. South Korea's Supreme Court has decided to uphold a ruling ordering a Japanese steelmaker to pay compensation to 4 Koreans, the company forced to work for it during World War II, when Japan ruled the Korean peninsula. The Japanese company, Nippon Steel and Sumitomo Metal Corporation, will be required to pay each victim around $87,000 for unpaid work. In its decision Tuesday, the Supreme Court said that a 1965 agreement between Korea and Japan did not terminate the right of individuals to reparations. It also took issue with the Japanese court's 2003 ruling that claimed colonization is not illegal and that the use of forced labor was not illegal either at the time. Those notions, the Supreme Court said, go against constitutional values. South Korea's foreign ministry said a meeting with related ministries will be held to formulate an official response and to determine how to move ahead. K-pop boy band BTS are taking a well-deserved break following their huge sellout tour of Europe and the United States. But one thing that hasn't slowed down is the band's ability to make huge profits for themselves and for the companies they lend their names and faces to. As our Seo-in-kyung explains, brands working with BTS do very well indeed.
2018 has been the biggest year yet for BTS, who've won international acclaim. But their influences is not limited to the music industry. BTS has proved extremely valuable to numerous companies, which are enjoying sales bonanza thanks to BTS-themed products. One of Asia's most popular messenger apps has a bunch of BTS-themed characters called BT21, which are inspired by the band members' drawings of themselves and by their personality traits. Right away, the characters were a huge hit at home and abroad. Stores in Seoul that sell BT21 products are packed with people from all over the world.
Yeah, we just came by to see the characters created by BTS. We really like the koala, Koya.
When BT21 products first went on sale overseas, the flagship store in New York got more than 30,000 visitors and the one in Harajuku got more than 15,000 on opening day alone. The character's popularity prompted Facebook to add BT21 emojis and AR effect to its messenger service, where they got a staggering 800,000 views in just one day.
The K-pop group is also the face of a range of cosmetics, as companies hope the boy band's popularity boosts their sales.
An up-and-coming Korean cosmetics brand has been working with BTS for 2 years now. Last year, the company released a BTS-themed collagen foundation and a toothbrush, which drew huge crowds to their stores in Japan. And this month, they introduced 47 new products featuring BT21 characters and saw sales go through the roof.
BTS fans in their 20s and early 30s visit our stores a lot.
Despite the economic windfall BTS has brought these companies, there are risks for the band.
Selling products based on certain artists brings big profits in the short term, but oversaturation and overexposure can damage the artist's long-term appeal to fans.
But for now, fans can't get enough and the BTS effect is going strong. Myoung-gyon, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The U.S. Special Representative on North Korea, Biegun, is in Korea and has been meeting with various South Korean officials over the last 2 days, some more surprising than others. To try and further look at what's behind the envoy's visit, we have now joining us Dr. Bongwook from the Yonsei Institute for North Korean Studies. It's good to have you with us today.
Pleased to be here again.
Now, before we get into the issues, though, let's start by taking a quick look at the remarks made by Biegun and his South Korean counterpart, Lee Do-hun, before their meeting on Monday.
I believe that we need to see each other as much as necessary because the denuclearization process is at a critical juncture. And we need to meet up as often as possible to make sure there is no daylight whatsoever between our two allies.
You mentioned 4 or 5 visits now since I began this job just 2 short months ago. I saw someone on your team had counted that this will be the 12th time that you and I have met in that process. We have a shared goal here, which is to bring an end to 70 years of war and hostility on the Korean Peninsula. And the primary requirement for us to get to that end point is to achieve the final and fully verified denuclearization of Korea, of North Korea. And so I am absolutely confident that this is within reach. I think our 2 presidents are singularly focused on this goal.
Exactly.
And it's my job and your job to provide the consultation, the ideas, the process, the execution to achieve that goal. I'm absolutely certain we can do this together, and we're looking forward very much to beginning working level negotiations with North Korea as soon as possible.
So, Dr. Bong, perhaps what's noticeable about those opening remarks we just saw there between the two is Biegun's mentioning of the final fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. He seemed to stress that a little bit. Do you think that was a deliberate message by Biegun to Lee and the Moon administration, which has recently focused more on cooperation with North Korea rather than perhaps a denuclearization?
Right, definitely. I think it is a very stern and clear response to Representative Mr. Lee Do-hun's remark that we do not have daylight whatsoever between our 2 allies, that is the United States and South Korea. But unfortunately, Stephen Biegun's remark and his emphasis on accomplishment of the final and fully verified denuclearization of North Korea as an absolute precondition for ending hostility on the Korean Peninsula is expression of disagreement that unfortunately there is daylight between the 2 allies in terms of sequencing the denuclearization process and improving the inter-Korean relations. And 2 allies need to have a very candid, although very difficult discussions, and tighten the bolts before the problem gets any worse.
So a clear message seems to be to his South Korean counterpart. But of course, Lee Do-hun wasn't the only person Biegun met on Tuesday. He also met with the South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Yonghwa. And then on Tuesday, he also met with the Unification Minister Myoung-gyon, along with the President's National Security Advisor Eui-yong as well. So a whole line of South Korean senior officials that he's been meeting with. What do you think Biegun is looking to achieve with all these series of meetings, especially people like Myoung-gyon, the Unification Minister, who's not really meant to be involved with relations with the U.S. The Unification Minister is meant to be in charge of just interaction with North Korea.
The purpose of having these multiple meetings with important leaders in the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea is to have himself opportunities to get educated about the Korean affairs, because Special Representative Biegun is not long-standing expert on Asian affairs, nonetheless the Korean affairs. So he needs to go through a fast learning process. He himself mentioned that he has been in this position as a special representative for North Korea for the Trump administration for 2 months, but he has had about 12 meetings with his counterparts, and he made 4 or 5 visits to South Korea. So he's very diligent in terms of observing as many pieces of information about inter-Korean relations and North Korea, and try to have as many opportunities as possible to get engaged with members of the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea, so that as he implied in his speech, in order to reduce or even eliminate any daylight between the two allies in dealing with nuclear North Korea.
Could it be said, though, that his diligence to meet with South Korean officials over the last couple of months that he's been in his position is because he's not been able to meet with his North Korean counterparts, despite the words made by U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo, who said they would be meeting soon?
Right. So his visit to South Korea instead of North Korea, or to Vienna, where he was supposed to have a meeting with his counterpart of North Korea, Mr. Choi Sung-hee, is a very clear indication that the United States will not easily relent to the pressure imposed by North Korea and its delaying strategy. If there will be no meeting between United States and North Korea, the United States will not just remain idle or just hopelessly waiting for North Korea to make additional moves in return for big concessions made by the United States. But the United States will remain steadfast without succumbing to the pressure of the delaying tactics of North Korea. So North Korea's strategy has been interposing South Korea between itself and the United States in order to obtain the status as a nuclear power state and receive a lot of economic benefits from the United States in return for very minimal concessions on the front of its nuclear weapon program and missiles. But the United States is not going to succumb to the pressure of that strategy, and by imposing kind of a stern message to its ally, which is South Korea, that North Korea's strategy will not really compel the United States to change its negotiating strategy.
Let's go back to Biegun's meetings with South Korean officials. So one of the most surprising meetings that we haven't really talked about yet was his meeting with President Moon's Chief of Staff, Im Jong-seok, on Monday. Now, Im doesn't really meet with other diplomats. It's not really his job, especially not in his own anyway. But apparently it was requested by the U.S. Why do you think Biegun wanted to meet him?
Well, Biegun wants to make a very comprehensive approach to dealing with this issue, nuclear North Korea, how to achieve the final and fully verified denuclearization of North Korea with a cooperation with its allies, such as South Korea and Japan. And as a chief of staff, Mr. Im Jong-seok is allegedly very influential upon persuading or dissuading the president to make important decisions with regard to keep process of inter-Korean cooperation and reconciliation, and the United States and South Korea's cooperation for joint security interest. So it is very noticeable that Special Representative Stephen Biegun specifically requested to arrange a meeting with Mr. Im Jong-seok, as well as a meeting that also included the Ministry of National Unification, which is somewhat unusual, right? Given the status of Mr. Biegun as a special representative for North Korea, meaning that this means that the United States is sending very clear message to the Moon Jae-in government. any attempts to break out of the existing economic sanctions in the name of inducing North Korean leadership to denuclearization will not be supported by the United States. United States believe that sanctions must remain in place, if not further reinforced, in order to keep pressure on North Korean leadership to agree on taking concrete actions of denuclearization in verifiable way. The argument by the South Korean government is that in order to assure North Korean leadership that denuclearization must be made in order to, for the leadership to achieve the basic conditions for economic development and the termination of hostility with the United States since the Korean War. But the United States will not accept such a South Korean government's argument, which also, let me remind you, was not accepted by other European countries such as France, UK, and the members of the United Nations. So, as reiterated in his speech, Stephen Biegun emphasized that South Korea and the United States have a shared goal here, which is to bring the end of the 70 years of war and hostility on the Korean Peninsula. United States, North Korea, and South Korea are on the same page with regard to that point. The difference is that United States believe that in order to achieve that shared goal, the primary requirement is to get to that endpoint is to achieve a final and fully verified denuclearization of North Korea. So the order cannot be reversed according to the Trump administration's basic position. Yeah. So, I mean, Biegun's message must be really alarming and disappointing to the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea.
You say that, but according to the readout from the Blue House, when Im met with Biegun said that he hoped for South Korea's support to have a successful North Korea-U.S. summit soon. Doesn't that suggest that despite these warnings from Washington, they still need South Korea's involvement to try and help the negotiations between North Korea and the U.S. as well?
Not necessarily. If there is North Korea's opposition to the continuation of economic sanctions, North Korean government may walk away from the scheduled summit meeting with the United States. And if South Korean government will not take any actions that would ease existing economic sanctions, especially the one imposed by South Korea as an independent measure, such as the May 21st measures or the resumption of Kaesong Industrial Complex, then North Korea may take an issue at non-action by South Korean government and begin criticize South Korea as a puppet of the United States. And the criticism toward the Moon Jae-in government of South Korea may escalate into criticism toward the Trump administration for its failure to, respect and carry out the basic agreements forged in the Singapore summit in June this year. Then the basic conditions for the realization of second DPRK-U.S. summit meeting may unravel. So in that regard, that South Korean government and the United States government may need each other to make sure that North Korea will not walk out of this negotiation table.
So we'll have to see how that pans out as well. Before we go, there are also reports circulating that the U.S. is holding behind-the-scenes talks, at least, with North Korea for Pompeo to meet with North Korean officials in U.S. next week. And now they cite unnamed South Korean diplomatic sources in these reports. But it seems it could immediately happen after the results of the U.S. midterm elections are announced. It seems like both sides, the U.S. and North Korea, have been waiting for these midterm elections to happen and then move from there. Could the North Korea agenda be picked up again after the elections, do you think?
Definitely, but this is not a good strategy for North Korea. I have no intention to give a good counsel to North Korean government because I don't get paid by the government. But it was a strategic mistake, in my personal opinion, for North Korean leadership to have taken too much time. It seems like Pyongyang has exaggerated the relevance of the result of the midterm election to the Trump administration's approach to denuclearization of North Korea. Elections are focused on local issues, like everywhere. United States midterm election is no exception. And defusing the missile and nuclear threat from North Korea is very important as a matter of national security for the United States and the President Trump of the United States. But midterm elections are run by local, regional issues, not national security issues or North Korea. So North Korean government made a strategic mistake to believe that it could play pressure on the Trump administration by delaying the negotiation until the day of the midterm election.
Well, that's where we'll have to wrap it up. Thank you for coming in today, as usual. It's always great to get your thoughts on everything.
You're welcome.
And that's all for today. I'll be back again tomorrow with more on the day's top issues. But in the meantime, stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscasts for all the latest updates. Thank you for watching and hope you have a great day. Goodbye.
Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV and Gallup Korea are conducting research on